Hey. What's up, everybody? What a show we have on tap for you. Some of our players won a trophy. We got a January camp to talk about and some biggest flops in MLS history, including maybe Lorenzo Insigne. We have a lot to talk about, so hit like and subscribe, and let's get after it. Hi, hello, and welcome to your favorite Average to Good podcast. Call what you want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Tony Meola, also known as Big Tones, and not Charlie Davies. We don't know where Chuck is. He's at one of his resorts that he owns, on one of his yachts outside of that resort, doing what Charlie does. I don't know. I'll let you guys try to guess in the chat what he does. But we have an amazing show. We got the January camp roster just dropped. I'm sure everybody's going to be pumped up for that, knowing the spirit of our chat and our community. Come on, let's be positive. Listen, can I say from the record, Big Tones, really quick?
Go on, son.
My first ever camp for the U.S. was in 2005, January 2005. Probably shouldn't say the dates. That makes me feel really old. But January 2005, that was my first ever time getting called in. 18 months later, I was playing in a World Cup. Guess what, Tones? We're 18 months away from the 2026 World Cup. Everything's possible at this point. So let's pump these guys up and let's not tear them down. That's what I'm saying here on Call It What You Want. Also, we're up for an award. You guys should vote for us. How's that for a right turn, Big Tones? So make sure you go to vote for us. The QR code is up there at the top. We've been nominated for Best Team Podcast in the 2025 Sports Podcast Awards. Also check the description. Also check anywhere you see Golasso America on the social medias. We have all that information. Big Tones, not only January camp, we have Christian Pulisic, Yunus, Musah winning trophies with AC Milan. We have some MLS news, biggest flops in MLS history. We got to get into that for sure. That'll be later in the show. Talk to me, though. We know that we've had this discussion before. The January camp, not as strong as it maybe used to be, but I think under Mauricio Pochettino, as relevant as ever. What are your thoughts on this before we get into this roster?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. First off, good to see you, man.
Likewise.
Charlie will be back at some point.
Maybe, if we let him.
Yeah. It's important. I always look at it from the player standpoint. I mean, you just talked about how important it was for you. I remember talking to Matt Beasler about how important it was for him. We'll call him a January camp national team player, right? Like that's kind of where he grew his wings. And I look at these names, and of course, we could always argue about the names and who should be there and who shouldn't be there and all of that stuff. But just put yourself in their shoes for a second. You just get called into Mauricio Pochettino. I'm thinking every one of these guys here is for the first time. Well, Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, there's a couple of guys. 90% of these guys are for the first time. Just think about
under Pochettino.
Under Poch, yeah. Mm-hmm. Think about that phone call or that email or however the hell they're doing it, text message now, whatever it is now, right? Just think about what it means to them. I would think if you're a goalkeeper, you're like, man, there's a door open for a couple of spots, right?
There is.
If you're a center back, you're like, yeah, the door might be open here for a little bit. If you're a midfielder or a forward, the door's not nearly as open as some of those other positions, but I think that's reflective of what Mauricio Pochettino did with the players that he called in. I mean, I look at the midfielders, there's technically 4 midfielders here, but as far as, to your question, Jimmy, as far as the camp and where it fits in, it's going to be important for Mauricio Pochettino. I said in that last show that I thought 3 players would come out of this camp and be part of, what is it? Is it March or April? It's March, right?
March.
March camp. I think 3 players will come out of here. Looking at some of these names, and I'm not counting, by the way. I'm not going to count Tim Ream, and I'm not going to count Miles Robinson, just so everybody knows in March if this happens. Those guys are, I think they're going to camp anyway.
Okay. I like that. And I like the emphasis that you're putting on this camp and just putting or asking our listeners / viewers to put themselves in these players' shoes. This is a huge opportunity. They're around this coaching staff for 2 weeks, and they got 2 games to prove that they can take that next step and to be a part of the group that's going to be coming together in March and potentially at the Gold Cup as well over the summer. This is big. Let's get into the roster. Okay, camp starts today in Fort Lauderdale, by the way. Goalkeepers, Pochettino called in 4 of them. We got Drake Callender from Inter Miami. You got Matt Freese from NYCFC, Patrick Schulte, and Zach Steffen. Those are our full goalkeepers. Before we break down all these line by line, I'm going to name all of the players first, Big Tones. Okay, defenders. There's 9 defenders. There's 11 midfielders and forwards combined, but 9 defenders. We have Max Arfston from Columbus Crew, coming off a good year. George Campbell from Montreal. DeJuan Jones from the Crew. Shaq Moore getting back into the team. Jalen Neal, who fell out with the Galaxy, didn't play a lot towards the end, back into the team. Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, John Tolkien. He'll be competing with Max Arfston for that left-sided defense or wing back. And then Walker Zimmerman getting in there. Yes, he's in camp, baby. All the Walker Zimmerman fans, stand up. I'm going to stand up as well. Let's go, Walker. Okay, now midfielders. We got Benya Kramaski from Inter Miami, Emeka Inelli from Real Salt Lake, 25-year-old holding midfielder. I like his game a lot. Like that he's getting a chance here. Diego Luna, reigning MLS Young Player of the Year, 8 goals and 8 assists for RSL. Jack McGlynn coming in. He is a baller as well. Got a spicy left foot. You got Patrick Agyemang, from Agyemang. Sorry, I apologize. I actually tried to practice that. I still butchered it. I apologize, Patrick. Caden Clark coming in after making the move from Minnesota to Montreal. In Minnesota, he wasn't really doing much, playing out of position. Goes to Montreal, 4 goals and 2 assists in 10 games. And look at him getting called into camp. Jesus Ferreira coming back in. Brian Gutierrez, nice to see him from the Chicago Fire. We have Indy Vasilev and then Brian White. And then 1 player out. Those are the 23 MLS players. And then we have Matko Mihailovic, who is in the team as the 24th. He was most recently at Newell's Old Boys, but you might remember him as the player that played for Montreal who wasn't playing a lot. So he went and played indoor and got into a fight with somebody in the indoor league and then got terminated from his contract and then went back to Argentina. And yeah, this guy's a bit of a mess, but I guess we'll give him a chance and see what's what. So I'm curious. I'm very, very curious. Let's start with the goalkeepers, though, with our resident goalkeeper, Tones. Bringing 4 in. Maybe not a big surprise there, but as you mentioned, wow, this feels a pretty wide open for this position, knowing that the top goalkeepers that play for us regularly aren't playing very often.
Yeah, so Drake Callender, he's been with the national team, not under Poch. Matt Freese is the one I'm happy about. I think he deserves a call in based on his work with NYCFC. Schulte and Zach Steffen have been there. I think Steffen got hurt right in the last camp, and he went back and didn't play. I don't, there's really no surprise here. Patrick Schulte clearly is the guy that. Here's how I see it. Patrick Schulte's the guy that is the most experienced, obviously, out of this group. Matt Freese, I would not be surprised if he's the guy that comes out of this group and we say his stock rose the most out of the goalkeepers in camp because he's really starting at ground zero, right, with getting into the national team. Doesn't have any caps, but he's coming off a great year and just thinking about where his sort of energy level will be. It wouldn't be a surprise to me, Jimmy, if that's how it went. Schulte, get some games with Matt Freese, we start hearing about him a little bit.
Okay. Do you feel like we're getting way ahead of ourselves? That's what we like to do here. That's why we're average is good, right? We get way ahead of ourselves. Tones, would you say that he's going to split the games? Like he'll give Schulte the Venezuela game, which is happening on the 18th of January in Fort Lauderdale, or he'll give the Costa Rica game, which is happening in Orlando on the 22nd, to Matt Freese. Do you sense that not just with the goalkeeper position, but overall?
Yeah, well, in general, I'm glad you brought that up because we may as well start from there. I'd like to see as many of these guys play over the next 2 games. Like I just, why wouldn't you, right? Like why? I mean, there's no, the results don't really mean anything, and you have to have an idea of what they do under your system. I think it's hard for this group because I think it's easier if you, I don't know, pick any one name on this team. I'll just go with Max Arfston because we're going to talk about the defenders next. He's the first based on his name. If you take him and put him into the full team, I think you get a better idea of what he really looks like. But when you take all of these guys together and put them together, I think it's really hard. I never expect in January camp, Jimmy, to have games that have a rhythm to it. I'm looking at individuals and how comfortable they feel. That's kind of, it would be so, I think, naive of all of us to judge the game at the end. Goes, wow, they were terrible today. Like, yeah, most teams in this situation are terrible because you're just getting everybody together. I look at guys that are individual with whatever the managers ask them to do. So I would hope that I'd hope we'd at least see 2 goalkeepers play in this camp.
Listen, I just want to go on record saying I never lost a January camp game. Can I throw that out there? It still matters. But there's still like an element, and I agree with you that it might not be a collective judgment from Pochettino and his coaching staff and more of an individual basis. Could you see a Tolkien or an Arfston, just to use those two on the left side, who I think will probably line up, maybe get a game each, bombing forward to the left back? Could you see them, if Jedi got hurt for whatever reason, that you could envision them playing with the first team? And that's ultimately what you have to prove. Is there a comfort level? Can they be players that can seamlessly transition into that next step, which is what every coach has to do, whether you're at the club level and you're bringing up academy players, or you're hoping that you sign someone in the transfer window and whatever it may be, and you're trying to integrate them into what you're trying to do. That's the talent and talent identification ultimately from the coaching staff. And that is part of their big challenge throughout this.
Right.
Who do we think we can trust? So ultimately, you want to see guys out there that know how to make plays, that have good situational, spatial awareness, that are executing the game plan the way that you want to see it be done, regardless of how maybe that sometimes fits in with everybody else. Because if somebody else isn't doing their job, but you're doing yours, it's interesting. There's a lot to break down with all this. But thinking of the defenders, 9 defenders are coming in now. I know that we have some conversations internally or off camera here about what formation Pochettino truly likes to play. I'm still convinced that ultimately, yes, it might line up and 4 on paper, but ultimately shifts into more of a back 3 or even a back 5 based on the situation. I think now when the names that got called in, for me, Tolkien and Arfston are wingbacks. And when I look at DeJuan Jones, that guy's a wingback. Shaq Moore is another wingback. So those 4 in particular are wingbacks, and then you're just left with 5 center backs for 3 positions. Right? You got George Campbell, you got Jalen Neal, Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, and Walker Zimmerman. And so I think we're going to see some type of combination of those players, because when I look at the forwards and midfielders, okay, maybe you could throw someone at a wingback position, but ultimately I think the wingbacks, outside backs, are going to be from this selection of defenders.
Here, so one quick note, right? Jalen Neal just got traded to Montreal, right? So we sort of, I still in my head identify him as an LA Galaxy player, but he's now at Montreal. So you got two center backs from CF Montreal. Arfston, I think he's played on the right-hand side. I think could be in that role, that right-sided role. He's my favorite sort of upside in this defender group. Watching him play this year, really skillful player, soccer IQ really good, all 3 ranges of passing, scores a couple of goals, fit in nicely with the way Wilfried Nancy wanted to play, which is not all that different, right? Maybe formationally different than what Pochettino wants to do, but he expects guys to be good with the ball, to be comfortable in tight spaces, to get forward, a lot of movement, like all the basic principles from Pochettino style. I'm looking at him. Shaq Moore, we know. I don't know in this hybrid sort of right back role. I don't see him as the guy that is getting forward all the time in that Yunus Musah role, and then I don't really see him as a center back in the 3. So it's going to be interesting to see. Well, obviously, with Tim Ream and Miles Robinson, we know what they can do. John Tolkien, he's going to have to work his way in. Can he get past? So nobody's getting past Antonee Robinson. So let me throw this wrinkle at you at left back. We've seen Weston McKennie play left back. Do you at some point, and by the way, the last game against Milan, he was good. The game before that on the weekend, he was not good. In that, I think was that the Atalanta game? I was up at Stanford. There's so many games, but he was not good that game. He got turned a couple times. And you can see 1v1 defending is not going to be a strong suit for him. He's better when he reads the game and goes and breaks up a play. But a guy that's dribbling, that's not necessarily his thing. But do you maybe make a concession and go, in a pinch, I could use Weston McKennie, so I don't have to take an extra left back in hopes that Antonee Robinson is going to run out the whole tournament, whatever tournament you play? So that's just something to consider. Who am I missing here? DeJuan Jones is a left back. Remember at Michigan State, when I scouted him, he was a left winger. and he still has that winger mentality in him when he gets forward. That's what Bruce Arena wanted him to do in New England. Now he does it with the Columbus Crew. So, I mean,
here's something to consider, Tom.
Solid.
I love where you're going with this, and I think there's a piece that needs to be brought into, and maybe we haven't discussed before, with Joe Scally being one of those, yes, mainly playing as a right back, but in some situations as we build out and we're in a 3, he's staying home more often than not. Yeah, there's been a couple instances where he's joined the attack, but ultimately I think his responsibility, or he's being asked to stay at home a little bit more. And maybe that changes as the comfort level continues to grow within the group and how they want to play under Pochettino. But I wonder if you are a DeJuan Jones and or Arsene, Scally, Shaq Moore, if you can demonstrate that you could hold your own in those back 3 situations, that's going to help level up the possibility, I think, to be selected, because you can offer up more than just one thing.
Right.
And to your point about Weston does bring that. Weston can play like every single position.
Yeah.
I'm sure he
Weston can put anywhere.
Yeah, right. So his value is so much more because of this ability to flourish at times, right? I know that he doesn't always want to play at left back.
He's a starter, though, right? Like, we look at him as an 11, right? The first 11 in Weston. And so it's a little bit different, because if you're one of these guys on the outside looking in, Jimmy, it's even more important, right? To be able to potentially play multiple positions. And in most cases, it's 2 positions. It's not like not everyone can do what Weston do and just, you could say one game, Weston, go play center forward today because we're just out of center forwards, and he'll figure out a way to do it,
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So that's just the back line. When we look at the midfielders, there's only 4, though Caden Clark could drop into midfield if they needed, right? You have Gutierrez could potentially. It just depends on how he wants to set up. If we're going to play kind of inverted wingers, double 10s, so we have a box in midfield and 2 6s potentially, or ones they start as double 6s and then maybe move into an 8 based on the situation. It just gives you different options. So yeah, some of these guys are listed as forwards, but I do think they could drop in Jesus Ferreira, right? Maybe at times we could argue better as a second striker than as a straight number 9. But when we think about number 9s, and we're going to get into snubs here in a second, but when we think about number 9s, we have Jesus Ferreira and Brian White are really the only. Aguiman is that dude's a beast. 6'4", 10 goals and 3 assists. For Charlotte this past. So I guess he could be an option too. So I guess we have 3 strikers, but they all bring a little bit something different. And if Ferreira wants to drop in and be the 10, we had some options. I'm actually pretty pleased, even though I don't think there's an out and out 6 outside of Anelli when I'm looking at the team.
Ben Kremoski can play as a 6, I would think, in this group. Anelli, he plays in there. Jack McGlynn, he doesn't really play in that. Yeah. Well, he plays more.
We got options.
Yeah, Diego Luna clearly not, but I'm happy to see him in camp for sure.
Right.
Aguiman is a nice get, man. He's, if you know him, he's a lanky forward, kind of hard to get your body wrapped around him. Like, physically, he's good on the dribble. And when he's dribbling, you always see guys trying to do the arms thing, and he's kind of shaking people off all the time. And young player, but it's got something to offer for sure. We know Jesus Ferreira and what he brings. The Miljevic guy, I just don't know much about him. I've seen some clips. It is a little bit troublesome that what was his last club he was just at in Argentina?
Newell's Old
Boys. Yeah. And I know he's rumored to go to Huracan. So, but doesn't it just? I know there's a connection, and I'm sure Pochettino has made all the calls to Argentina, that he's jumped around all these clubs for problems. It's not like you're moving up and you're getting a transfer fee and you're getting better. And I just don't know enough about him, so I'm interested to see him play at least.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting. Lots of choices. We've got 2 games, 2 weeks. We're gonna have to figure it out. Let's talk about omissions from the team. We have Jackson Reagan. He came on the show. Maybe we have a little bit of curse here. Call it what you want. He came on the show. Daniel Edelman also came on the show. Didn't make this 24-man roster. I'm surprised in some ways that Brandon Vazquez isn't involved after making his big move to Austin FC, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Maybe, I don't know, what would be the holdup there, unless you just wanted to see some of these other players and you already got a taste of Vazquez. Fair enough. But yeah, I feel for these guys because they put together good seasons. Reagan in particular, up for the Defender of the Year in MLS, and I probably would have brought him in over Jalen Neal, but maybe there were some conversations that happened behind the scenes that turned the head of Pochettino in a positive way with regard to Jalen Neal in particular. Any thoughts on these omissions?
Yeah, for me, Jackson Reagan's the one. I just find it would be very hard for me to argue with Mauricio Pochettino and any center backs he does or doesn't bring in because if there's probably one position that's manager's got to do everything, but if there's one like he probably has a vision, it's a center back of what he wants the center back to look like. So that would be the one. I thought for a second, and just because of the finals, I thought Mark Delgado might have an outside shot. I know Mark is a little bit older. I think he's getting close to 30. I did the game. I don't remember, but I know he's getting close to 30. I see him like he's not Malik Tillman, but sometimes he's more effective than Malik Tillman. I don't know. There was just something that said maybe Mark Delgado gets another look at the national team. But clearly it's a crowded position, and it didn't happen. And I think the other one that'll drive people nuts, but I also thought was Jordan Morris. I just thought like the season he had now with Jesus Ferreira going there and maybe occupying the 9, and Jordan Morris can get back to where he's probably best, Jimmy, and playing a little bit wider. Maybe we'll see a different story, but he has scored goals from there. But I mean, it's so hard to argue with this list. But those would be the names, outside of maybe some of the ones you gave. Jordan Morris,
I guess I hadn't. J-Mo Smooth. I wonder what kind of conversations are being had behind the scenes. We don't know. Some guys might need a rest. Some might have been hiding an injury for some time, got some surgery. Who knows? There's a whole bunch of those things that you hear about later on after the fact. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a pretty promising list, and I'm excited to see how they perform. And now, before we take our first break, we have a comment from Derek who's coming right at me. Jimmy often over-internalizes Camp Cupcake because of his own experiences. So I would say, Derek, great to see you as always. Appreciate your support. Why wouldn't we? I mean, we're here as former players on the show. We're here to speak about our experiences. Have the times changed? For sure. The camp and the evolution of the January camp has changed based on the evolution of our infrastructure here in this country, and that we have more players playing in Europe than ever before. I don't know how else to explain it. Am I here to sit here as a former player that took advantage of my January camp and say, you know what? January camp is shit. Don't even bother. Why do these guys even come in? What's even the point? Like, I don't understand that vitriol that comes to the January camp cupcake thing. I don't understand it. Why aren't we here promoting these players and being excited for them to get these opportunities? This is their chance, man, to get in and try to win over the coach. Why is that such a bad thing? I don't understand it. I don't understand where it comes from. Other than jealousy, I really don't know. Are you telling me because if that came to you, Derek, would you be like, no, I'm going to pass it up. It's a January camp. I don't have time for that. I'm too good for the January camp. What are we talking about? I don't understand what we're talking about. So yes, do I have an emotional trigger? Of course I do, because we're demeaning the people that are getting called in that have worked their asses off to get this opportunity, and you're brushing them aside like they're shit. I don't have time for that. I really don't. So if you want to come at me, then I'm going to come back at you because I don't really believe what you're subscribing to. Am I over-internalizing, being over-emotional? Of course I am, because this camp mattered to me. And it's going to matter to these guys if they can take advantage of it. Now it's up to them to walk through the door and do it. But at least they have this chance. No other national team in the world has something like this. And we dismiss it like nothing. Just casually dismiss it. It's unreal. And I don't have time for it. So if you want to come, I'll be at the coaches convention. You come up and talk to me in person. I'll tell you the same stuff, just as emotionally. So it can be on camera. It can be in person. Doesn't matter. I'll come on your podcast, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. All right, we're taking our first break. Call what you want. When we come back, we're going to applaud Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musah for winning the trophy. Don't go anywhere.
Soccer brings out a different character in me.
Captain America has taken this team on his shoulders.
He doesn't like to be called Captain America, but I don't care. You are Captain America.
Take a sneak peek into my trailer.
Turn that off. Christian Pulisic is captain of the U.S. national team.
First time an American has been a main player.
Pulisic won it for Milan.
I'm one of the biggest clubs in the world.
No pressure.
Every game under scrutiny.
I'm a pretty private person. I've got the camera in my face a lot.
No, don't do that.
His leadership is unbelievable.
I would like him to be a little bit the bad guy.
Christian's never wanted the spotlight.
These are the kind of goals that create legends.
You don't make documentaries about everybody.
I want to be the best player in the world.
Welcome back in to Call It What You Want. Jimmy Conrad alongside Tony Meola, not Charlie Davies. We don't know where he is. He's having fun somewhere, though. And we just saw, well, hopefully you heard it if you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice. But we just saw here on the YouTubes, Golasso America, hit like and subscribe. The promotion for Pulisic's documentary on Paramount Plus. Go watch it. It is awesome. And you know what's interesting, Big Tones, is that ever since this documentary has dropped, a notoriously private person has really taken his game to the next level. I really feel like this thing dropped and he's like, I don't know if he said anything or hit a switch, but I got to be the guy. Sometimes it goes the other way, right? It's a curse of being on Madden or on some video game cover or having something out there that maybe you're just like, I'm not feeling comfortable with. But this guy's taken it to the next level and won a trophy and scored a goal. And I mean, he scored a goal in the semifinal and the final, the Supercoppa. I mean, it's amazing. This guy continues to find new levels. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, he's maybe it's just Jimmy. Forget the doc. Maybe he's just getting better. I mean, he's just getting better as we sit here, and you can see how much Milan needed him. Obviously, I was excited to see him not only draw the penalty kick, and by the way, no question, it was Christian Pulisic's penalty kick. Remember the drama earlier in the year with the penalty kick. It was that Fiorentina game, right? David De Gea was in goal for that. And think about the scene we saw that there wasn't anyone in that penalty kick within 10 yards of him, right? He had the ball. He was waiting there for the referee. They believe in him. And then I was talking to Des prior to the show, just in general, our producer. We were talking about just the great finish from Pulisic when the ball's underneath his feet and it gets to him quickly. And he gets it through the defender's legs. I mean, just the level that he's playing at right now. And by the way, he doesn't even look fit right now. I don't know if you saw it. There were a couple of moments where he had his hands on his knees, and he's not that guy, like your hands on your knees, breathing out of your nipples. And he's been that guy for like 20 minutes in that game yesterday. And I'm like, holy cow, I don't know if he's going to make it. And he just keeps fighting through. So good on him. Maybe they have to, I think there's 3 episodes. Maybe they'll have to add yesterday's accomplishment to the last episode. Maybe that's what they're waiting for to put it out. But it's a big moment for him. The guy's now won a trophy at every one of his clubs. Put this trophy wherever you want to put it, right? Everyone will say, it means a lot. It doesn't mean a lot. It probably means more to the 4 teams that the 4 teams that were in the tournament than it does to the 16 teams that are not in the tournament. But if you watch that game, if you watch that semifinal post-match celebration and what it meant to that Milan team, and then yesterday, the derby match, lifting a trophy, manager second game when things aren't going well and you're starting to change your system. By the way, they didn't play well during the game, but they fought their asses off during the game and grew back into the game. And I think that's probably the best position for a manager to be in, where you can go, okay, look what we did. We won something. We didn't even play well. Yeah. We weren't good, especially the first 45 minutes in both of those games. They were outplayed by Juve and they were outplayed by Inter, but you fought your way in. So if you can think about, we've been in dressing rooms, right? Like what that means, like you look around sometimes, you're like, tonight's going to have to be one of those nights we just battle because we don't have all our guys or whatever the reason is. Man, that's a good position to be in. But the credit to Christian Pulisic, he came right back into the lineup. Yunus Musah gets a start yesterday after, okay, is it a fortunate goal? Probably. Was he a guy that was a protagonist on that goal? There's no doubt about it. He came in. He was really good against Juve. That's 2 really good performances from those guys. Really, really good.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the trophy cabinet of Christian Pulisic because, as you mentioned, every club that he's been at, he's won something of consequence. In Dortmund, He won the DFB Pokal in the 2016-2017 season. Chelsea, he won the Champions League in 2021. He scored in the semifinal on their way to that trophy against Real Madrid. He won the UEFA Super Cup in 2021. He won the FIFA Club World Cup in 2021. And now with Milan, he's won the Italian Super Cup and was a pivotal player in making that happen, scoring a goal on both legs. And actually, what I love, maybe even more than his goal was so well taken. I don't want to take anything away from that, Big Tones. But what I really appreciated was his assist. Or the second assist, ultimately, the ball that got played.
To Leao.
Oh,
yeah.
Just having the vision and the understanding, and maybe more than that, and I think this will be important for their new manager, Sergio Conceicao, is the relationship between Leao and Pulisic. If Milan's going to go anywhere this season, if they're going to make sure they get into the top 4 and get into the Champions League or whatever it may be, there has to be a nice relationship between those two. And so Leao makes a great run, good timed run while Christian's looking up. Christian plays a great weighted pass. Leao taps it across. Tammy Abraham taps it in, and then that's the game winner. I love that. And so
wasn't that ball left-footed too, Jimmy? Wasn't that a left-footed?
Picked it up off of his shoulder, looked to play forward, right? When we're coaching and we're teaching the kids or any of the players that are around for, like, how quickly can you look forward? How quickly can you hurt a team by looking into those pockets of space that are in front of you and not just always playing safe because you're afraid to make a mistake. I love where Pulisic is. I love his confidence right now. And I want Yunus Musah to borrow some of it too, so he can continue to be in the starting lineup and get good experience as well. But let's talk about Sergio Conceicao as our resident Milan fan. As you mentioned, not so great in the first halves, but I think what he's implemented in a short period of time is that he made adjustments that made a difference in the second half. Right. And so, yeah, of course, we could sit here and talk about players and the work rate. Right. For me, work rate is just a choice. You have a choice to work hard, to cover for each other, to do the little things. That's a choice. Now you can have a manager that's emphasizing that, and that's how you're going to be evaluated and judged. I'm sure that's part of Sergio Conceicao. I have no doubt. But he made some tactical adjustments as well. And when they worked, that's where you're going to get even bigger buy-in from the group. And so I wanted you to maybe touch upon Conceicao, not only laying the foundation of having this trophy to lean on in tough moments, but also just having that tactical acumen to solve problems.
Yeah, well, the first thing he said it in his press conference. He said, "I'm not about ticky-tacky football. That doesn't mean anything to me. I need to be effective. And whatever that is for my team," he said, "but we're going to work." Yesterday, in the first 10 minutes, if you watch that game, they sat back and between their center backs and Morata, the forward, there were 20 to 25 yards. Where they started to have problems is when they started to go up high and press a little bit, and all of a sudden Inter picked them apart. And he stuck with it for a little while. Then he got away from it a little bit in that second half, and it was sit back. I think this is a counterattacking team, the same way his Porto teams played. And I think that's where they will be the most successful. I also think if you're going to turn it back to an American standpoint, the work rate that he expects in the midfield and in wide areas, I think Yunus Musah is going to benefit from being with Conceicao. I think the way Yunus Musah plays is more suited to what Conceicao wants to do than it was to what Fonseca was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And how many times have we said, like, in moments where Musah's picked up the ball and like spun somebody and dribbled like 15, 20 yards before he releases it, right? Running into space, getting on a counterattack someplace. I think we're gonna see. But the fact that he, after the performance that Musah put in, I don't know how many minutes he played, I forget, against Juve, but he came in as a sub. And of course, he's involved in the second goal. But the fact that he started him, Jimmy, in a final on, let's call it day 2, right, for Conceicao, don't you think that means something?
Yeah, it does, 100%. Yeah, that means a lot. You clearly identified the player profile of Yunus Musah and thought, okay, what didn't work against Juve, I think that this player and what he brings, his skill set, can give us an advantage in some capacity, right, on either side of the ball. So, yes, getting that type of trust in a final against one of your biggest rivals, and it works. I mean, yes, they were down 2-0 and they got punched in the face a few times, but they figured out a way to turn it around. And for Yunus to be a part of that, imagine from a U.S. men's national team perspective, he was on the outside looking in. He was part of the team, but wasn't actually on the field. That would have been harder for him, I think, to earn that trust. But since he was one of the players that helped turn it around, I think that's going to go a long way with Sergio Conceicao in particular. So there's a report now, Big Tones, that's coming out that Milan might be considering bringing in Marcus Rashford from Manchester United, who clearly looks like he needs a change of scenery. Given what you've seen from Rashford, let's say historically, because we know the guy's got the goods. He's a hell of a player, but he needs to be locked in a certain way to reach the heights that we know he's capable of. And right now he's not hitting those heights, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. Would you entertain the possibility of bringing in Marcus Rashford to Milan and potentially interrupting the flow of what's being established?
No, I would not. Especially what I saw yesterday. And we talked about this in the post-game show yesterday. There was a moment before Rafa Leao came on the field when Conceicao was giving Leao instructions. He was engaged. If you go back to Fonseca, remember the time when he and Theo got benched, Theo Hernandez got benched, and when they had the break and everyone came, they stood on the other side of the field and were drinking water. They didn't come into the huddle. He was not engaged at that time. And then when I saw him, first off, his plays, the pass to Theo on Pulisic's goal, the one that sprung, the one when he turned the corner, and who was it, Reinders, that hit the ball into Bastoni, that you thought it was a goal when he cut it back, but Bastoni makes the sliding tackle, and it goes either off the bar or over the bar. Those moments, we're watching Leao, and then he loses the ball. He turns around. Bisek is going, and he chases him down and pulls his hair. Like, I'm not condoning pulling the hair, but the fact that he actually worked to do that, I'm like, maybe this is the Portuguese manager he needed to get on his side, right? I don't think I think Leao was from Sporting and Conceição's from Porto, so they don't have that connection, but maybe this is the guy that can get the best out of Leao. If you can get Leao back to, let's call it 90% of Scudetto winning year form, even 80% of that, there's no way you bring in Marcus Rashford. There's no way for me. Where would he play in this Milan side? The only other place he could play is if he took Christian Pulisic's spot, if he decided to play him on the right-hand side. And I just don't think you need him in the group. I think Marcus Rashford can go and turn his career around someplace, and probably will, because he's that talented. It's clearly not going to happen at Manchester United. But I don't, if you're asking me, does he fit in Milan and would I want him? No, it's because I like, if they can get Leao where he's at, I like where it's at right now.
I mean, how many underperforming strikers can you have on one team? Tammy Abraham, Alvaro Morata. You know, I mean, how many?
I was so happy for Tammy Abraham.
Yeah, I was too. I mean, you know these guys are talented. It's just like, can they find that rhythm and that consistency and confidence and to bring on a Rashford and try to prop him up while you're trying to also prop up Morata and Abraham seems like a big challenge. And trying to obviously squeeze more out of Leao and make it all work. Yeah, I don't know if it's worth the trouble for Milan. Well, speaking of Christian Pulisic and his new documentary, again, catch it on Paramount Plus, shameless plug alert. He did not win U.S. Soccer's Male Player of the Year for 2024. That award went to Antonee Robinson, which, that guy had a hell of a year and continues to have a hell of a year, or as he now expands it into 2025. But with all due respect to Jedi, I don't know how you could not give it to Christian Pulisic. I mean, the guy was immense for Milan last year and then started off red hot. And obviously he's the guy that we count on to score goals for our national team. And so listen, as a former defender, I'm excited that we had a defensive player recognized. And maybe there's a thought of like, we can't give it to Christian every single year. Well, didn't Zlatan win Sweden Player of the Year like 10 years in a row? Like it's okay to reward somebody that was clearly the number one guy. I feel like it should have gone to Christian Pulisic, even though I love that it went to Jedi. Your thoughts, Big Tones?
Yeah, first off, congratulations to Antonee Robinson. What an incredible, 12 months. He's been great, as we know. He hasn't missed games. He's grown into the discussion, Jimmy, of where he fits in world football for left backs, all the way up to, is he world class and is he the best one in the world? All of that's great, but I thought Christian Pulisic, based on what he did at Milan, one of the biggest clubs in the world, with so much pressure, would have won the award. But we're probably splitting hairs with all of this stuff.
Sure.
I'm going to guess, and I have no idea. I'm going to guess it was the closest vote ever in the history of U.S. soccer for the male player of the year. Like it was by one vote between Christian Pulisic and Antonee Robinson. How's that?
That's totally cool. I want to straddle that fence as well. We actually did a poll to see what the community thought about this. Jedi or Christian Pulisic, who had a better 2024? And Jedi is the winner. It's close to 60%, 59% to Christian's 41%. And getting some good comments, super fair comments that Jedi's playing against world-class competition game in and game out. And they're suggesting, Big Tones, I don't know if you've seen some of these comments, that Christian isn't playing against that same level of talent week in and week out, which I think is a bit of a shot to Syria. Trying to trigger Tony. What do we got? We're 40 minutes in. Can we get him? But they both had great years.
Doing it in Champions League and Real Madrid, and he scored in 2 derbies now. Like I know that yesterday's doesn't matter, but it's not. That's a knock on Christian that I think is a little bit unfair. But I that's why I started from the beginning. I'm happy for Antonee Robinson. Good on him, and I'm with you. I'm glad they
deserved. Yes.
Yeah. It's not as no one said that Antonee Robinson doesn't deserve it. It's
right.
So someone thinks that Christian Pulisic had a better year than him. It's just the way it is. I'm more interested in who wins Player of the Year after the 2026 World Cup. That's what I want to know.
Damn straight. That's the best way to say it. All right, we're going to take our next break of Call It What You Want. When we come back, we're going to get into, this should be fun because me and Tones have been around for a while, biggest flops in MLS history based on some of the offseason moves in Major League Soccer this offseason. Don't go anywhere.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back to the stretch run of Call It What You Want. I'm Conrad alongside Big Tones, and we are getting after it. Now, this is the off-season time for Major League Soccer. Congrats once again to LA Galaxy for becoming champions for the 6th time, which is an MLS record. And we got some news, though. Brandon Vazquez, as we mentioned before, completes his move to Austin FC. He's going to be a DP signing. How are you feeling about this both ways, Big Tones? Both for the club, for Austin, and their new head coach, Nico Estevez, who took over for Josh Wolf, and also for Vazquez himself, coming back from Monterrey, where he scored 14 goals in 2024 in the calendar year. He obviously was killing it for FC Cincinnati before he left to go down to Mexico. Now he's coming back to Austin. What do you say? Good for Austin? Good for Brandon? Give us both perspectives.
Definitely good for Austin. No doubt about it. Good for Austin. For Brandon Vazquez, I think ultimately it will work out if he can get back into form. The form that we saw in Cincinnati. Because I think it will propel him into more of Mauricio Pochettino's camps. Sitting on the bench, look, when he went down there, it was Bertarame who we thought was going to. We thought the deal was done in Portland, right? We thought that deal was done, and it didn't happen, so it kind of hurt his position in the group. So I think this will give him a better opportunity to be part of Pochettino's camp. So for Austin, this is a win. Win, because they got something that they needed. They got a guy who can score goals. They got a guy who's a target, a guy who's dangerous in the box, a guy who can run behind defenders, a guy who can hold the ball up, who's good in the air. They needed a guy like that for Brandon Vazquez. He needs to get back on the field, period. And he needs to be playing 90 minutes. And I saw they did a great job of introducing him to the city and the supporters and all that stuff. Hopefully it works out because I still think I get the sense you mentioned earlier about the camp that, Brandon Vazquez wasn't involved. I don't think he's a snub. I think Mauricio Pochettino knows what he's got from Brandon Vazquez. He's used them in both camps. So, yeah, let's see how it turns out in Austin. I think it's going to be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I am curious to see how Driussi does as a number 10, having a presence like Vazquez up ahead of him, as opposed to, no disrespect to Diego Rubio, but the skill set and player profile of or Zardes when he was whoever was in there. There's just something about Brandon Vazquez that I think will hopefully elevate the numbers of Driussi in particular, even though it's being reported that he might be leaving. But I wonder if this changes his mind. You bring in Brandon Vazquez, you're like, maybe I'll stay. This looks like we got something promising here. So obviously something to keep an eye on, but good signing for Austin FC. I like that one a lot. All right, next one. Jalen Neal, you talked about it before, going to Montreal. And the big question is, what went wrong at the Galaxy? He was the guy. Came from their academy. He has 6 caps with the U.S. men's national team. He was slated to be the future, the cornerstone of that defense. He could learn from Yoshida. He could learn from other players that are out on the fields. I'll tell you what happens. They got this guy, the Galaxy, Carlos Garces, who I thought was the MVP of the MLS Cup final. I thought he was so good. He's only 23-year-old, this Colombian. And when he got in the team and started to play regularly, you couldn't take him off the fields. And so Jalen Neal was also watching him play really, really well. And because Garces is 23 and Jalen Neal is 21, and they got some pretty good Gam and Tam and green eggs and ham from Montreal for Jalen Neal, and some other mechanisms are fun MLS mechanisms that the Galaxy can take advantage of. Will Kuntz and Greg Vanney elected to let Jalen Neal go and allow him to hopefully flourish with Montreal. But I think that's the biggest reason. It's just the emergence of Carlos Garces. What are your thoughts on Jalen Neal, Big Tones?
100%. He wasn't better than Yoshida or Garces. I mean, that's the reality, right? And there was before he got hurt early in the year, there was Cáceres who was playing. Remember, Neal started the season injured. That's right. And then Cáceres got injured. Garces was working his way into the team for a little bit, and they still weren't playing Jalen Neal at that time. So yeah, he's a game changer type center back in the league. I don't know that he's going to be with the Galaxy for a ton of years because I just think he's destined for Europe, Garces. But Jalen Neal needs to play. He needs to play now. And he needs to get minutes. And if he's going to have any, I don't see him as a center back choice for 2026. But if I'm Jalen Neal, of course you're fighting for that. But if I'm Jalen Neal, I want to be in that first camp, Jimmy, whenever that is after the World Cup of 2026. And I want to ride that thing out to the World Cup if I can. Like that's I think got to kind of be his mindset.
Right.
Sure, he's gonna do everything he can to be successful. But if you're like advising the pathway, I mean, is that a crazy pathway to advise him for? Look, we've got center backs right now. Yeah, there's a scramble. There's a couple of openings, but I think we have a general idea of who the group will be that will be competing for center back positions. And then you look at that first camp after 2026. I want my name in that list, and I want it in the list every single camp moving forward.
Yeah, no. I like that mindset. I like that pathway. In some ways, almost similar to Austin and Brandon Vazquez. I see this as a win for Jalen Neal, and I see this as a win for the Galaxy. So I guess we'll have to look back in 5 or 10 years to see who won the biggest, right? And what the Galaxy did with what they received from Montreal and what Jalen Neal did with Montreal. But yeah, interesting times and a good opportunity. Sometimes I was with San Jose my first 4 years. We won MLS Cup, and then I wasn't playing center back per se. I was playing a little right back, left back, center back. And then I got traded to Kansas City, and you were there when that happened. And I blossomed and really came into my own. And sometimes that change of scenery makes a big difference. We'll see if it does the same for Jalen Neal. All right, here's a fun one. This was going to lead us, our nice segue into biggest flops in MLS history. Let's talk about Lorenzo Insigne, because Toronto FC are looking to offload this guy. Now, he has the second highest salary in the league, $15.4 million, which is more than the total wage bill of 7 other MLS clubs. It's only second to Lionel Messi. And has he earned that money? I guess that's the big question. It looks like Fiorentina and Como are both reportedly interested, but nobody wants to pay those wages. This is ridiculous wages. Now, he played 63 games in all competitions for TFC, 18 goals and 13 assists. I don't think that's the worst rate of return.
Is that one every 3 games, right?
But for that price, you expecting a lot more for that money. They didn't make the MLS playoffs at any point in his 2.5 years. They never even won the Canadian Championship, which I thought they just did with their eyes closed, but they were runner-up in 2022 and 2024. I mean, it's wild. They got to get this guy off the books, and I know that he had run-ins with Bob Bradley and other coaches along the way, and this hasn't worked out. I wouldn't consider him, though, if we get into the biggest flop conversation, I wouldn't consider him the biggest flop in MLS history. But for the price, he's in the conversation because of how much they pay him per year.
Yeah, that's a lot of scratch, man, to pay somebody in this league and not get like full return.
That's a lot.
You mentioned Fiorentina. He doesn't play at Fiorentina right now if he goes. He doesn't play, I don't think, at you don't
think they put him at Como? They give him some run. They give him some time.
Como plays, man. They're one of the teams that puts the ball on the deck and plays. He probably could play there. They play like Cesc Fabregas played, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do. But he's not playing at Fiorentina right now. And Como is not paying him nearly what he's getting here. I think the biggest problem is he and Bernardeschi have they wrote out Bob Bradley. They've written out managers. They've been a bit of a headache. And then at the end of the year, say, well, no, next year we're coming, and he's, this is going to be better. I mean, this is going to be great. I love being here. Yeah, you love being there. 15 million, you better love being here, right? Because you're not going to get 15 million unless you're going to a Saudi Arabian side right now that might even take a guy like him. Those other places are going to be hard for him to play.
Yeah,
and they need that. Look, my flight got in at 4 a.m. last night, Jimmy. Did Toronto hire a manager today or no? Did I miss anything?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay, good. But so I'm just wondering who's making the. I didn't know if I missed something this morning, but I wonder who's making the decisions on players, right? Imagine you bring in some manager that said, "Oh, shoot, man, you just sold the guy that I was going to build a team around."
Yeah, I feel like he's shown and demonstrated enough over his 2.5 years that
you're probably not going to.
Probably don't want to count on the guy. And if you can somehow offload some of that salary, I mean, imagine the players you could go get if you were going to actually use that money to build your roster. I don't know. You could get 3 pretty good players off of $15.4 million a year. 4 players?
You think?
Players. Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure that was already in the works, and now it's just kind of coming to a head. Maybe they thought they could get some value from him from other places, but it doesn't seem like that's happening. Very curious to see how that unfolds. But let's get into it. Biggest MLS flops, Big Tones. For me, when producer Dez asked us to kind of put this together, I immediately went to Danielson. Remember Danielson? Brazilian.
Yeah. Dallas. Was he in Dallas?
FC Dallas. Had a cup of coffee with FC Dallas. Listen, this guy, he was a baller. Like he played for the Brazilian national team, played in the 98 World Cup, 2002 World Cup. So won that one. Won the 2002 World Cup with Brazil. Super good on the dribble. Real Betis paid $35 million for him coming out of that 2002 World Cup because his talent was undeniable. But then you fast forward to 2007 when he signs with FC Dallas or whenever he came in. He was terrible. This guy had 9 games, 1 goal, and the goal was a penalty. And so it wasn't like he went out. The guy was terrible. In 2008, 0 regular season appearances. Maybe the most overhyped, biggest flop in my time playing. I remember going, this guy's bad. I was disappointed in myself. I wanted Danielson to be like the Danielson we saw in commercials and playing for Brazil. Did you play with Lothar Matthäus, by the way? He's
no, he's after me.
Yeah, Matthäus,
when I left,
Who was on your list?
I'm trying to think of the guy's name that I played with in New York. We brought in the Chilean player. We paid him $800,000. Bronco got no. I didn't have him on my list. Bronco played 8 games, and I think he had 3 red cards. So he might be on that list, but I can't say him. He was such a great guy. I feel bad. I feel bad putting one there. Rafa Marquez came to mind for me. Thinking about his pedigree.
Insane.
Frank Lampard, his time here, I didn't think was great. Someone wrote to me a while back, Pirlo, and I'm like, when you watched Pirlo, like there was still a little bit of class in it, not a little bit, a lot of bit of class in his game. Like when he played, it just didn't, he played on a really bad team. I'm trying to think of the guy's name.
Frank Lampard actually put some numbers together, though. I mean, he had 15 goals and 4 assists in 29 games. So it wasn't.
He's
still
off the
like
list. He's off the list.
I gotta. Yeah, he's not a flop. I feel like he put enough together, though. He was part of that 7-0 loss on aggregate to Toronto FC in the 2016 quarterfinals. Which, come on, dude. How about Steven Gerrard? Steven Gerrard. I mean, his 2016, he had 3 goals and 11 assists in 22 games. But they were coming off that generation where they just won a bunch of MLS Cups with Robbie Keane and Beckham and Landon. And then he came in. I actually think Douglas Costa is a bigger bust for the Galaxy.
Douglas Costa, yeah.
He looked like he phoned it in and game out. Game in and game out.
Who else is on the list then?
I had Rafa Marquez for sure. That dude, he listen, there was a quote I found from him, which I forgot about. So Rafa Marquez said this. I think this is the team game. And unfortunately, there isn't an equal level between my teammates and I. He said that while playing for the Red Bulls. He got 2 red cards in pivotal playoff games. Both of them ended up being losses for the Red Bulls. He just didn't contribute at all. Didn't look like he wanted to be there. Tried to pick fights all the time. We already know that he had a little bit of that in him from playing U.S. versus Mexico games. But yeah, he was a mess. He was a mess. He actually said that when Thierry Henry was on his team too, which is kind of funny. We had Freddie Adu potentially, just because he actually beat me in MLS Cup 2004, MLS Cup final. Oh, Tones, you were there too. Listen, that sucked. That we lost to Freddie Adu.
Yeah, Jim. I was watching that game too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up old stuff. How about a recent example? Jordan Shaqiri. Where would you Chicago fire?
Yeah, you know what?
So
that
he
was
has
not
some
good.
numbers, but like it you don't.
They were all penalty kicks. Man.
That's true. That's true.
They were all penalty kicks. I mean, yeah. I mean, he had no numbers, and I used to hate when he was screaming at all the time. He was screaming at Brian Gutierrez all the time. I'm like, dude, you're the leader making $8 million a year.
Yeah.
And you got this young kid who's probably so excited to play with you. And every time he did something wrong, which, by the way, most of the time, as far as I saw, was Shaqiri's fault, he would be yelling at Gutierrez all the time. I mean, screaming at him. And we used to sit there going, oh, I can't believe this kid's going to crumble. And good on Gutierrez because he just continued to flourish and flourish. Yeah, he's on the list, Jimmy. Shaqiri's on the list for sure.
Hey, shout out to the comments for bringing up Freddie Lewinberg as well. Got to play against him a few times, and he was not in his peak Arsenal form, let's say. That's a good shout, Freddie Lewinberg. Another one that I had to get reminded of when I was looking for names that we had played with or against, or even recent names, Big Tones. But remember Nery Castillo? Who came into the Chicago Fire with all this fanfare and was absolutely terrible. I think he was actually part of Man City at some point. And the guy was awful. I mean, he kind of falls into for me, Danielson showed some previous talent, and I guess that designates more of a flop. Maybe Castillo did as well, but man, he came in and he was
Danielson was one of the best dribblers in the world that right. For at least a month he was.
Yeah. I don't know. So I'm with A. Ivis in our private chat, our producer Ivis, who says that Nery arrived as damaged goods. If that's the case, okay, fair enough. But he was terrible. So I just want to throw that out there.
What am I seeing? What did Des put in there? A lot of Zlatan slander.
Zlatan slander?
Didn't Zlatan score like 51 goals in 52 games or something like that?
Zlatan, do you think Zlatan was a flop? I don't think he was a flop.
I don't think so. No, I don't even think that's not even on the radar, I don't think.
No, Zlatan wasn't even close to top of mind. Because the guy, in some ways too, yes, he didn't win anything, but he also helped move the needle for the league. I thought, well, I guess it depends on how you rate Zlatan, but I thought it was in a positive way, right? The guy could walk his talk, unlike most players. Well, nobody runs their mouth like Zlatan, but the guy I thought the guy backed it up. He scored some ridiculous goals, and his games were must watch. I wasn't must watch in Nery Castillo. I guess Freddie Adu kind of falls into that camp too, because you just wanted to see what the hype was all about, and unfortunately he didn't deliver. But at least he brought you in and made you want to watch. And you can't say that for, I guess Danielson did at one point, and then you're watching him going like, this guy is absolute trash. Kaká is an interesting one. He didn't deliver to what we know he's capable of,
but he was he's kind of back end of his career. Yeah, we did mention Rafa Marquez quite a bit as in this one. It's for me, I maybe because I was watching the Red Bulls at that time, a little bit more. I was paying more attention there, but he's the one that came to mind as soon as I saw this.
Yeah, that's good. It's a fun conversation. We should do a compilation of the worst flops and their worst plays in MLS history, because that would be fun. We should put somebody on that. That sounds like a lot of work. All right, that's it. We're calling it a show. Thank you for hanging out with us. As always, congratulations to Christian Pulisic, Yunus Musah for winning a trophy with Milan. Congratulations to Jedi Robinson for being the male athlete of the year. That is a big deal and well-deserved. Congrats to all the players that got called into the January camp. We hope that you take advantage of this opportunity. And we'll be back with you guys on Thursday. And if you're going to the Coaches Convention in Chicago, I'll see you there. Later.